Hello everyone, if you would get your Bibles and turn to John chapter 5. John chapter 5, we're going to continue our study of the miracles of Jesus. In our study today, this guy is just kind of picked out of a crowd for Jesus to heal and to come and assist. Reminded me of the song, Who Am I? Who am I that the Lord of all the earth would care to know my name, would care to feel my hurt? Who am I that the bright and morning star would choose to light the way for my every wandering heart? Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. This guy, in this miracle, it just seems like Jesus picks him out of the crowd of maybe hundreds of other disabled people who are in this area. Hundreds maybe of people who needed healing. And from what I can see from this story, Jesus only heals this guy, only talks to this guy, and this is the only guy who is healed. In verse 3 of John 5, it says there was a great number of disabled people in this area. Lame, blind, or people that needed healing. Why did Jesus pick this guy? Why did Jesus pick to heal just this guy? Why didn't Jesus heal everyone that was there? Maybe there's a lesson in this for us, just in this fact that Jesus picks us out for certain things. Maybe he picks me out to heal me from a certain thing and not you. Maybe God picks me to do a certain work and he picks you to do something else. Maybe I think that God was going to pick me to do blank, but he picks something else. Why would, I would think, who am I that I should be your Sunday school teacher? Who am I? I'm nobody. We might think, who is Jeremy Huddleston that he would be our favorite deacon? And Jeremy would say, I'm nobody. We would say, who is Shane Parker that he would have the most awesome beard of all time? Shane would say, I'm a nobody. God just blessed me this way. We'll see from this story that this guy was a nobody, that Jesus just picked out of the crowd to heal him and to teach us a lesson even today. This guy, in this story, his faith wasn't real strong. In fact, he doesn't even know who Jesus is. Jesus never introduces himself. Apparently no one tells him, hey, that's Jesus. He's the guy that's been healing people. Because after the miracle, Jesus just walks off. He doesn't say, hi, I'm Jesus, the Messiah. He just walks off. And as we'll see in the story, he gets questioned later about it, and he just says, that guy. He doesn't even know. Let's read the story. John chapter 5 is verses 1 through 15. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who was there who had been an invalid for 38 years, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes in ahead of me. Then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. At once the man was cured, and he picked up his mat, and he walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who he was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. So stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and then told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Let's just work our way through this story, and we'll look at what happened, and then we'll look at the lessons we can learn from it. Verse 1, it talks about the Feast of the Jews. There were 7 different celebrations that were going on here. You can read about them in Leviticus. I think it's chapter 22, 23. You can read about all the different celebrations that they went through in this time. And it was real busy around the city temple area during this time. In verse 2, it talks about the sheep gate. If you remember from the story of Nehemiah, when he rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem, the sheep gate was the very first gate that they put up after the wall was completed. And it was the very first gate that the opposition that Nehemiah was going against talked about, well, even if a fox jumps on the gate, it's going to fall down, the wall's going to fall down. And if you remember the story in Nehemiah 12, it says the choir got up on top right here at this gate, and they got up there and sang and danced, and they were probably swaying back and forth, and Nehemiah was just showing them this wall's okay. So that's where they are right here. This pool that they're talking about in verse 2, did some research on that, and it says the pool was 360 feet long, 130 feet wide, and 75 foot deep. That's a very large pool. We'll talk a little bit more about this pool in a minute. It talks about the colonnades surrounding it. These are kind of like arbors, or just some things that go around for some shade for the people that are there. Very impressive to me, probably the sight of the pool and all these porches around it is probably very impressive structure and pool, except for who is there. In verse 3, it talks about the large number of disabled people who are around this pool. To me, this is probably a sad sight. It's not really that impressive, as far as it's probably an area, if we were lived in this day and we were to go by, we would just kind of look the other way. We wouldn't look over there. It'd probably be like a nursing home with a lot of disabled people, or maybe a veterans hospital, waiting area where you just see people that are just struggling with their disabilities. Probably most people avoided this area to walk by or even look over that way, because it was not probably pleasant. It's not a pretty picture. It's not something that would be on the vacation brochure for this area. It's just not a pretty sight. We would assume most people probably felt sorry for these people. Maybe they sent an offering to the pool fund and just help people out to feed them over there. But I would imagine most people just avoided going there. Why were these people at this specific pool? This guy gives an answer about when Jesus asked him to get well, when he says, "No one will help me into the pool," in verse 7. Why does he need to get in the pool? Well, in my Bible, I have an NIV Bible, and verse 4 is missing from John 5 in mine. And I have a note down at the bottom that says, some less important manuscripts deleted this verse. And it says, this is what it would say. "And they waited for the moving of the waters, because from time to time they believed that an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. and the first one into the pool after such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease he had. So they believed that there was some kind of movement in the pool, some kind of bubbling up of the waters, or just maybe the wind went across it and they thought it was an angel or something. But they believed that this would cure them. It says in verse 5 that one was there, one, who had been an invalid for 38 years. Apparently, Jesus just picks out this one, and he goes to this one guy. Invalid for 38 years. Is he 38 years old? Did he have this from birth? Is he 50 years old and he got it when he was 12 and so he's had the disease for 38 years? We don't know, but he's had this problem for 38 years. Then it says in verse 6, but Jesus saw him and learned about this condition, and he'd had it for a long time. So Jesus saw him, he focuses in on this one guy, and he learns about his condition. So that leads us to believe he questioned the man about his condition before he asked him this one question that is recorded here. Jesus gets a closer look at him. Maybe Jesus squats down there beside him and gets real close and is talking to him very quietly and closely. Again, remember what I talked about in verse 1. This is Passover time. Doesn't Jesus have more important places to be, more important things to do? Shouldn't he be up at the temple teaching and preaching? Maybe, but he's going to go there. But right now he wants to talk to this one guy. He asks him an interesting question at the end of verse 6. And he says, do you want to get well? Now, we might think this is a silly question. If you've had this problem for 38 years, you would say, duh, I want to get well. But as you know, in our life today, we see people who almost enjoy being sick. It's almost a sickness in and of itself. People who like the attention that comes with whatever they have. Maybe they don't try to get better. They just kind of like the martyr mentality of woe is me. And you probably know some people like that they just don't try to get better, and they don't really care about getting better. This guy, in his answer, when he replies in verse 7, he doesn't really say, yes, I want to get well. He gives a negative response. He says, I can't. It's impossible for me to get well because nobody will help me to get into the pool. When the waters are stirred, I'm too slow. I don't have anybody here to put me in. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. I'm disabled. I can't get in the pool when the waters move. Now, I don't know if this is true, that if you can get in the water, you were healed, but these people here believe it. Apparently, somebody was healed at some point in the past, or they would not all be gathering here with this belief in their mind. Somebody maybe got healed at some point in the past. Because it just so happened they got in right when the waters were moving, and maybe it was true. But they all believed it could happen, so that was in their mind. This guy, he's an invalid, he can't walk, so this is his response, that I can't. Maybe I want to, but I can't, because I can't get in the water. His response here is interesting. Jesus just gives him 3 instructions here. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk off. That's all. He doesn't put his hands on him. He doesn't say, you're healed, your faith has made you whole like he does in some other miracles. This guy doesn't seem to have a lot of faith. What faith he does have is kind of shaky. And again, prior to this, there's no evidence that this guy knows who Jesus is or he has any faith in Jesus' healing power. But in verse 9, apparently he has some faith because he obeys. He does what Jesus tells him to do. It says instantly he was cured, so he felt strength in his legs and his arms, and he felt in his feet he could stand, so he felt this strength, and he gets up, picks up, and walks. Simply, that's it. That's all he does. He gets up, picks up, walks off. And it seems that Jesus gets up and walks off too. Jesus slips off, and it seems like Jesus is going to make his way up toward the temple area now, maybe where he's going to do some teaching and preaching up there. In verses 9 and 10, you see that this guy, like in some of the other miracles, he runs across the party pooper Pharisees. And as we see here at the end of verse 9, this miracle occurs on the Sabbath. It's kind of like the miracle of the man born blind in John 9, where they're trying to call it off. It doesn't count because it happened on the Sabbath. Well, this guy is just going to get in trouble because he's doing something he's not supposed to do on the Sabbath. It was against Old Testament law to do certain work on the Sabbath. They had made so many ridiculous rules that you almost couldn't move without it being considered work. One of those things that was considered work was carrying your mat, whatever this mat was. This guy was carrying it along, and the Pharisees are like, hey, you're working, you can't be carrying your mat. So what does this guy say? He doesn't want to get in trouble. So he says, that guy over there told me to do it. The guy who healed me told me to do it. And so he blames Jesus. He doesn't know who Jesus is. He doesn't say, Jesus told me. He says, that guy. So they're like, well, who told you to do that? And he's like, I don't know. Just the guy who healed me told me. The party pooper Pharisees are not going to celebrate his miracle. They're only going to try to get him in trouble for carrying his mat, and the guy who told you to carry your mat is in trouble also. Like I said in verse 13, it says the man had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped into the crowd. Jesus didn't say, hi, I'm Jesus. He doesn't introduce himself apparently. So this guy doesn't know. Verse 14, it says, later Jesus found him at the temple. And Jesus tells him something interesting here. He says, I'm glad to see you're doing well. And then Jesus gives him a very strong statement here. And he says, stop sinning or you're going to be worse off than you were before. So maybe that leads us to believe that this guy got in this predicament, this disability, because of sin. Maybe sin caused this problem. You remember in our miracle we looked at last week, in John 9, the man born blind, the disciples asked, why is he blind? Did he sin or his parents? And Jesus said, neither. But in this case, it seems like sin is a reason that he has this disability. So Jesus gives him some instructions. Don't stop doing what you were doing, or you're going to be worse off than you were. This guy's at the temple. Why is he at the temple now? Maybe he's there to worship. Maybe he's there to thank God for healing him of this problem he's had for 38 years. Verse 15 is kind of confusing to me. It says, the man went away and he told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. So he finally figures out who this is that has healed him. And so is he tattling on Jesus to the Pharisees? Or is he giving Jesus credit for the miracle? Whichever it was, it doesn't help Jesus from this point forward, because the rest of this chapter, Jesus is arguing, well, John 6, 7, and 8, really. He's arguing with the Pharisees about various things. So it doesn't really help Jesus's ministry for a few minutes here, because he ends up arguing with these people. What are our lessons to learn from this miracle? For me and you, we can think about, who am I? That God would come and pick me out to put me to work in a certain area, just to call me his child, to save me. Who am I? We can think about, we were helpless and hopeless and disabled before Jesus came and rescued us. In fact, the scriptures tells us that we were dead. We were dead. What can a dead person do? You're right, nothing. They can't do anything. Colossians chapter 2, verse 13 says, when you were dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your sinful nature, God made you alive with Christ. God forgave us all our sins, having canceled the written code with its regulations, the law, that was against us and that stood opposed to us, and he took it away, nailing it to the cross. And God disarmed the powers and authorities, and he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them to the cross. We think about, we were dead, but now we're alive. Now we have hope. Now we're not hopeless. We think about where we were lost. Now we're found. We were blind, but now we can see. We were lame, but now we're walking. Just like this guy. Because of Jesus and because of him saving us, the scriptures tell us we're made righteous and holy and justified. A lot of fancy words that don't really go with me or you. But God tells us we are those things now. We're at peace with God. Another thing we can learn from this story is this guy took Jesus at his word. His faith was shaky. He doesn't really know a lot about Jesus. In fact, we could see he doesn't even know who Jesus is at first. But he got up, he picked up, and he walked. Because Jesus told him to get up, pick up, and walk. Now if you'll turn to Psalm chapter 70, let's read this psalm here of David as we conclude. This psalm is, the title, the heading that's given at the top is Poor and Needy. It's a psalm of David, and it's talking about that he wants God to come and assist him and to help him, and thanking God for doing those things. Psalm 70 verse 1 says, hasten, O God, or hurry, O God, to save me. O Lord, come quickly to help me. May those who seek my life be put to shame and confusion. May all who desire my ruin be turned back in disgrace. May those who say to me, aha, aha, turn back because of their shame. But may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love your salvation always say, let God be exalted. Yet I am poor and needy. Come quickly to help me, O God. You are my help and my deliverer. O Lord, do not delay. Again, thank you all for watching today. I'm supposed to get some more information about Sunday school in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a meeting, so I'll let y'all know when we're going to meet again. But thank you for your participation and your faithfulness to support me. Thank you.